Hi everybody, welcome back to Philosophy 1200. Still doing natural deduction. Today should be Wednesday, April 1st. To this point, hopefully you have good familiarity with our first four rules of implication. In addition, I hope that you have good familiarity with how to do proofs and what we're doing when we do proofs. From this point on, proofs are only going to get more complicated. So if you're still struggling a lot, you might want to pause this video and go back and practice before you come back to it, because today we're going to introduce our last four rules of implication. So after today, you'll know all 8 rules, and you should be able to do more complex proofs. Those will be all of the implication rules that we'll learn in this class. We'll learn different kinds of rules to do proofs later on, but they function a little bit differently than implication rules. So yeah, once you have all 8, the range of proofs that you can do open up dramatically. And if you're starting to get bored with the initial first 4 proofs, these should make them a bit more exciting. That being said, let's get into it. So our first rule is simplification, and it's a fairly simple rule, as you might expect. Simplification just says that whenever you have a conjunction on its own line, you're allowed to split that conjunction into its conjuncts. And that makes sense because, again, when we're doing a proof, we assume that all the premises are true. So if we have a conjunction on its own line and we assume that that conjunction is true, the only way for that to be the case is if both conjuncts are true, right? That goes back to the truth table. So if both conjuncts are true, then they should be able to stand on their own, and that's exactly what simplification asserts. So whenever you have a conjunction, you can pull down P or you can pull down Q. You can also pull down both. You can put P on one line and then you can put Q on another line. So I'll draw an example. So say we have this, and if it's A and B, well, on line 2, I can pull down A using simp. But also, I could just stop there. If I only need A, then I can just take A and I can do other inferences. But if I want, I can go ahead and pull down B as well using simplification. So, when you're doing a proof, what you want to do with that is completely up to you, whether you want to pull down one or the other or both. But in my opinion, I think it's usually good practice to use simplification to pull down both whenever you see a conjunction. Whenever you have a conjunction on one line, go ahead and simplify it, because usually it'll give you a lot of tools to work with, even if one of those tools doesn't end up being the most useful. So yeah, that's simplification. If you have a conjunction, you can split it up. That's all it says. So we'll go through some substitution instances of simplification. So here's the first one. Trump is the president and Pence is the vice president. Therefore, Pence is the vice president. So this is a real world example where both parts of the conjunction are true. And that's how we symbolize it. So both parts of the conjunction are true. Therefore, they can both stand on their own. Whether they're conjoined or not, it is true that Pence is the vice president. And from the assertion of that conjunction, we know that both conjuncts must be true if they're going to be on a proof. So yeah, that's a perfectly good instance of simplification. So here's this one. I'm not going to the laundromat again. Moreover, I will wear these pajama pants all week. Therefore, I will wear these pajama pants all week. So moreover is a conjunction word. We just symbolize it as a dot. So here, even though we have a negated conjunct, we're still able to pull down the other conjunct. And if we wanted to, we could also pull down this conjunct. The fact that I'm not going to the laundromat again stands alone, despite being part of this conjunction. All right, if this coffee is a day old, then it will taste like shit. And if it tastes like shit, then I will drink it anyway. Therefore, if this coffee is a day old, then it will taste like shit. I know this one by experience. Here's the symbolization. So here's one where we have a much more complex conjunction. It's still a conjunction because that's the main operator. It's the operator that stands outside the parentheses. But each conjunct is a complex statement, each being a conditional. But the rule of simplification still applies. If you have a conjunction, you can pull down a conjunct. But what's important is that you pull down the whole conjunct. If you were to try to say only put down the T, taking it from here, that would be wrong. This whole thing is our little p. So when we pull it down by using simplification, we have to bring the whole thing. But I use that example just to show that no matter how complex the conjunct is, you can still pull it down using simplification. All right, and I tried to pull some philosophy quotes because I found these examples to be rather boring. So here's one from Nietzsche. He who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster. And if you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you. Therefore, if you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you. This quote is perfectly summed up in the plot of the movie Mean Girls, which is a highly philosophical movie. I encourage you all to watch it. So this is a very sort of complex statement that there's more contained in it than our system of logic can sort of pull out, but here's, I think, a perfectly good translation of it. So here we have still a conjunction, but one of our conjuncts is a conditional. And we can, again, like the previous examples, we can pull down any conjunct we want. So here we choose to pull down the conditional. We could have pulled down this guy, but that's a perfectly valid instance. All four of these are perfectly valid instances of simplification. And that's how it works. It's a it's a simple rule and one that's, I think, very useful. And yeah, in terms of practicality, whenever you see a conjunction, use simplification on it. At least once, probably 2 times. All right, so our next rule is sort of the sibling of simplification, and it's called conjunction. So conjunction is pretty much the opposite of simplification. And it just says anytime you have 2 statements on their own line, you're allowed to conjoin them. And that works because, again, we're assuming all the premises in a proof are true. So if we have 2 statements on their own line, we're allowed, if we have 2 statements on their own line, they're both true, right? Well, if they're both true, then any conjunction we create out of those 2 will also be true because both sides are true. Go back to the truth table. So yeah, anything in a proof, you can take 2 separate lines, slap a dot between them, and create a conjunction. It's not always the most useful rule, but it's nice to have in your back pocket. So we'll go through some substitution instances of conjunction. Again, I pulled some philosophy quotes. Here's one from the 19th century German philosopher Hegel. The force of mind is only as great as its expression, its depth only as deep as its power to expand and lose itself. Therefore, the force of mind is only as great as its expansion, moreover, its depth only as deep as its power to expand and lose itself. So with this translation, all I really did was I turned this period into a comma moreover. So with this rule, it shows that whenever you're doing a translation and you have 2 separate sentences, via the rule of conjunction, you can always slap those sentences together using conjunction. So we had M being the force of mind is only as great as expression, and then we had this existing conjunction E and L. Well, via conjunction, we can slap a dot between them and create this larger conjunction. Here's one from the great set of philosophers, Radiohead. I'm not here, this isn't happening. Therefore, I'm not here, and this isn't happening. Did the same thing, turned a period into a dot, creating a conjunction. So we had not I, we had not H. From that, we create the conjunction, both not I and not H. Valid instance of conjunction right there. Another one from a great set of modern philosophers. If you get too cold, I'll tax the heat. If you take a walk, I'll tax your feet. Thus, if you get too cold, I'll tax the heat. In addition, if you take a walk, I'll tax your feet. So another example where I scrapped the period, slapped a conjunction word in it, and made it a conjunction. So here we had two conditionals, if the then is sort of implied by the comma, and then another if statement. But be a conjunction, we can slap a dot between them no matter what the statements are. So, however complex a statement in a proof is, you can always use conjunction to conjoin it to another statement. Whether it's a premise, whether it's, an inference, anything like that. So long as they're on their own lines and you take the whole thing, you can slap them together. So like with this, if I tried to say, therefore, C and W, that would be wrong. Because for the purposes of this, that's our P, and then that guy is our Q. You can't split them up because you're violating the main operator. You have to take the whole line when you're using conjunction. That's very important. All right, now the next rule is probably the weirdest one in the bunch, and it'll probably be a little confusing for a little while. It's called addition. And addition simply says that given any statement, you can create a disjunction from that statement. So here we had P, and from that we infer either P or Q. Note that this is only a disjunction. You can only create a disjunction by doing this. So it seems to be, at first glance, this rule seems to be the sort of keys to the kingdom. You can add whatever your conclusion is and be done. But no, you can only add to create a disjunction. And usually it's hard to get rid of a disjunction. So unless your conclusion is a disjunction, it's probably not going to solve the proof in one step. But yeah, this rule's a little weird, so we'll go through some of the examples and hopefully that'll clear it up. So I will go to the laundromat today. That's our singular statement. Therefore, either I will go to the laundromat today or I will play World of Warcraft Classic. That's a valid inference, and that's a valid instance of addition. So, say that maybe I'm talking to my girlfriend about what I'm going to do today, and I tell her, well, I'm going to go to the laundromat. But in my head, I feel really tempted to level up my druid and not go to the laundromat, or maybe do both. Maybe I'm equally tempted by playing World of Warcraft Classic. So while I say this, it's a totally good inference to imply that I have multiple desires or multiple intentions with what to do with my day. And that's just a valid application of addition. There's always options in life, and that's captured by addition. We always have a choice. So, similar example, I will not go to the laundromat. Therefore, I will not go to the laundromat, or I will go to the laundromat. So same thing. Say I tell her, well, I'm not going to go today. Well, via addition, it's possible, it's perfectly good reasoning to think that I might change my mind. So I'll either not go or I will go. We've seen from the previous unit that that's a tautology. It's always true. But via addition, we can turn any statement into a tautology, which is kind of cool. But yeah, I think that this sort of example is, once you think about it and understand it, fairly intuitive, because we do these sorts of things all the time. We'll say one thing or we'll set our mind to one thing, but other possibilities might come to us. Things might change. We live in a world of disjunctions. I could be dead set on, I don't know, going to CVS today, but later on I might think, oh, well, maybe it's better that I go to Walmart, and then I'll go to Walmart. That's me inferring from the circumstances that I have another option. And that's pretty much exactly what addition does. And we can also use these with very absurd examples. So I'm 25 years old, therefore either I'm 25 years old, or if pigs can fly, then I am the queen of Armenia. So here we started with Y, and then we inferred this whole conditional. What's also important with addition is that whatever you create or slap on as the other disjunct can be as simple or as complex as you need. So for this, I completely created a conditional that has nothing to do with reality. But it's still a valid inference because I'm still 25 years old, It's totally true that either I'm 25 years old or if pigs can fly, then I'm the Queen of Armenia. Whether or not this is true or false doesn't matter because Y is true. And if it appears in a proof, we know that it's true. So that's just to say that with addition, you can slap on either a simple statement or a complex statement. Which you want to do depends entirely upon the sort of strategy that you're going to take when approaching the proof. A lot of times, and I think in this case, addition can provide less information than when you started. Like we started out with something fairly simple and true, but then we added all this stuff that's like, well, okay, if pigs can fly, then I'm the Queen of Armenia. Does Armenia have a queen? Am I eligible to be a queen? These are all the sorts of questions that sort of muddy the waters. So that's the sort of harm that irresponsible addition can do. But it does go to show the sort of power and the possibilities of this rule. All right, so this last example, if this coffee is giving me a headache, then I will either continue to drink it or I won't continue to drink it. Therefore, either if this coffee is giving me a headache, then I will continue to drink it or I won't continue to drink it. Or if I exist, then I have hands. So that's kind of a mouthful, but I want you to see that we started here with a fairly complex statement. We started with this complex conditional, but via addition, we validly slapped on another conditional to it. And that's still a valid instance of addition. Yeah, and that's just to sort of prove the same sort of point with number 3, that you can slap on whatever you want via addition. You just have to make sure that with this complex statement, I had to add another set of parentheses to distinguish that that is one disjunct, and then add another set of parentheses to whatever I was slapping on. So in this case, that whole thing is our P, and then this whole conjunction is this whole conditional is our Q. But yeah, it's still a perfectly valid instance of addition. So this rule is weird. I think once we start doing proofs, you'll start to see when it is useful. It definitely shouldn't be one of your first thoughts when you're attacking a proof. But there are very specific situations where addition is necessary. And I think as we do more proofs, you'll come to see that. All right, our last rule, I think, hopefully is fairly intuitive. It looks very intimidating, but we do this a lot. It's the constructive dilemma. So a dilemma is, usually characterized as a difficult choice. And from that choice, you can imply certain things. And that's what the constructive dilemma does. So if you have two conditionals, and usually they have to be conjoined, and then you have a disjunction that has the antecedents of both conditionals as their disjuncts, then you're allowed to infer a disjunction of the consequence. So again, that's a mouthful, but I think once we go into some examples, that'll become more clear. And then, a lot of times you'll be given these conditionals, but they aren't conjoined. So I like to say that if you want to cut out the conjunction, you can totally do this. So if you have two conditionals anywhere and you have a disjunction of their antecedents, you're allowed to infer the consequence, a disjunction of the consequence. All right, so either I'll order pizza or I'll eat leftovers. If I order pizza, then I'll have less money. And if I eat leftovers, I'll be dissatisfied. Therefore, either I'll have less money or I'll be dissatisfied. So this is given us straight up in the form of CD, except we have the order switched, but that, as we saw in the first four rules, that doesn't disqualify it from being a valid substitution instance. So we have the disjunction, or sorry, let's start with the conditionals. So we have two conditionals, and we have a disjunction where the disjuncts are the antecedents of both conditionals. So we have if P then M, well, P is one of our disjuncts, and then we have if L then D, and L is the other disjunct. So from that, we can infer the consequence, M or D. Yeah. So I'll either order pizza or I'll eat leftovers. Well, if I order pizza, then I'll have less money. And if I eat leftovers, then I'll be dissatisfied. Well, we know what our options are, and we know what will happen if we take either option. So what constructive dilemma says is, well, we can sort of cut all that stuff out and just get to the consequences. Well, given this disjunction and these consequences, either I'm going to have less money or I'm going to be dissatisfied. Constructive dilemma is useful for that sort of purpose. It takes our options plus the consequences for those options and allows us just to consider the consequences. I think that, if you come up with your own everyday examples, you'll find that you do this a lot. Just by evaluating your options, evaluating what will come from those options, and then making a choice based on those outcomes. All right, more complex example. If I drive to Cleveland, then I'll be tired the next day and might wreck my car, but I'll see the show. If I don't drive to Cleveland, then I won't see the show. Either I drive to Cleveland or I don't. Therefore, either I'll be tired the next day, might wreck my car, but see the show, or I won't see the show. So this is a, very sort of complex example. And here I use the sort of alternative form of CD. But we have a conditional, we have another conditional, and then we have a disjunction where the antecedents of both conditionals are the disjuncts. So this is what happens if I go to Cleveland. This is what happens if I don't go to Cleveland. And we have it established that I'll either go to Cleveland or I won't go to Cleveland. Well, via CD, based on this disjunction and based on these consequences, I can create a disjunction of only the consequence. So either I'll be tired the next day and wreck my car and see the show, or I won't see the show. What the CD does in this case is only it allows us to only consider the consequences. We cut out all this other information about whether I'll go to Cleveland or I not, and I can then just think about, well, do I want to see the show or do I not want to see the show? Well, if I see the show, then I have to take all these risks that come along with it. So that's what the CD does. It's very uncommon. You should probably only think about using it in a proof when you're kind of stuck. Because, yeah, it takes a lot to do, and it's rare that you have all of the conditions to do it in one proof. So, yeah, there are very specific times when this is necessary, but it's important to know that that's, a valid rule. So that's it for my explanation of the rules today. I highly suggest that you go onto Blackboard and you read the supplemental readings. I think that the book that I pulled that from does an excellent job in sort of explaining how the rules work and how you might use them in a proof. So yeah, with what would be the rest of class time, I would suggest you go read those. On Friday, we're going to jump right into doing proofs with all 8 rules, and we'll probably spend a good amount of time on that. And probably by, proofs using the first 8 rules will be most of the exam that's coming up. So I'll probably have more to say about that on Friday. So, stay safe, stay healthy. I'll see you on Friday.